Okay, welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started. We're just waiting for a few more people to join us. This is the fiscal year 2016 Renewal Project Application Training. My name is Amanda Borda with All Chicago, and I'm going to be leading this webinar today. So hopefully everyone can hear me. I'm just going to go into the chat box real quick just to see if anybody's telling me they can't hear me. Okay. Sounds like we're good. Okay, so just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. All lines have been muted for now. You will have the opportunities for questions during the presentation, and you may be able to just raise your hand or submit questions through the chat box. When you're asking questions, just ensure your mic is working or utilize the phone call-in option. Sometimes the call-in option works better than the microphone on the computer. But feel free to use that chat box throughout the presentation, and I'll be checking that just to make sure any questions aren't coming in. Okay. So our learning objectives today are, one, to do an introduction to HUD Exchange resources and all resources needed to complete the renewal project application, and then to ensure everyone understands how to complete the renewal project application for fiscal year 2016 HUD CoC competition. And then finally, we will go over how to submit a draft of the renewal project application to All Chicago for review, as well as complete that final submission in eSnaps. So our agenda today is that we'll first go over some process, deadlines, and resources, and then we'll go over the details of the fiscal year 16 renewal project application itself. And then finally, we'll talk about how to submit in Survey Gizmo for review by All Chicago. And then finally, what you'll need to do to finally submit in eSnaps. And then we'll have some time for some final questions and answers at the end, a little Q&A. So just to go over the process a little bit first before we get into the details, agencies are first required to complete project applications for all HUD-funded renewal projects and new projects. This training today will cover just renewal projects and not new. There is separate training for new projects process, which is currently underway. And then collaborative applicant, which is us here at All Chicago, will collect and review all of those applications and complete the CoC application as well at the same time. And so all project applications and the CoC application are then submitted as one consolidated application to HUD, and that due date is by September 14th. So just an important process note, keeping in mind that September 14th deadline, that's our deadline, that's not your deadline. I'll explain your deadlines in just a minute. HUD may issue up to 2 conditional funding announcements as indicated in the NOFA, or Notice of Funding Availability. So similar to previous years, if you have a start date in the first quarter of the year, the beginning of the year, you may need to plan ahead just to continue operating that grant without drawing down money, since grants might not be executed for fiscal year 16 just yet. So here are your deadlines, just so we're clear. The applicant profile and the project application PDF drafts are due via Survey Gizmo by August 1st at 5 p.m. And then we will do a review here at All Chicago and provide feedback to you, most likely by August 8th. That is our goal. And then you will finally do a submission in eSnaps by August 12th at noon. So keep in mind the August 1st deadline is by 5 p.m. and August 12th is by noon. And yes, this year you will submit the applicant profile and the project application in PDF form in Survey Gizmo. So we'll go over more of those details in just a minute throughout the presentation. Keep in mind that eSnaps, as of this morning, as far as I know, is not yet open. However, this deadline will remain. This is our final deadline that we can have based on the timeline requirements that we have through HUD. So we are required to have all project applications in 30 days before that September 14th deadline. So no deadline extensions at this time can be granted. Should anything change, we will send out notification to everybody. I'm just going to check. We have some questions coming in. Okay. All right, so I'll repeat these deadlines at the end, but just keep them in mind as we're going in. Since HUD was a little late on releasing any of the resources in eSnaps, it's been a little bit of a delay, so we're sorry we had to reschedule the webinar and push back our deadline a little bit, so we're on a little bit of a tighter timeline than we had initially anticipated. All right, so just to get into some of those HUD resources really quickly, this is the advanced webinar, so I think most of you know these. They should be familiar to you. We have the instruction guides on the HUD website. Some of those have been posted, and just this morning, I believe the regular eSNAPS Renewal Project Application Guide was posted, as well as the detailed instructions. There's also frequently asked questions that HUD will post throughout the competition as they get questions in, and that's through their Ask a Question portal. So if there is a question that is not answered through any of those other guides, the instruction guides or the FAQs, you can always submit a question to HUD as well, or let us know and we can submit a question on your behalf. So a little bit more detail about the instruction guides themselves. There are several of them. So you can navigate to that page from that previous link, and then you will click on CoC Program Competition Project Applicants, and then you'll find the rest of the instructional guide. So there is a Renewal Project Application Instructional Guide, as well as a detailed instructions. The detailed instructions will cover details of every question in the application itself, so that's a little more detailed. It's 150 pages, it's quite long, but it separates out by project type. And then the instructional guide itself more so covers step-by-step through eSNAP, so they're a little bit different. You'll also have a budget project application instructional guide that's specific to the budget section, and then possibly a performance measures instructional guide. It's posted there as a sort of space holder, but that section is not actually included in the project application at this time, so I'm not sure if that one will be posted. These will also be posted to the All Chicago website once they are available. We will be updating that, so if you'd rather access our website to find everything in one place, you may do so, and you can do that through that link right there. This training will also be recorded today and will be posted there and available. Just a little bit of information about when to use HUD resources or eSNAPS resources versus All Chicago staff resources. So eSNAPS is a HUD system, it's not our system. So if you have eSNAPS technical difficulties, or if you're locked out or don't remember your password, if the system's running slowly, those are things you'll need to contact HUD about or their eSNAPS virtual help desk, as we can't answer those questions here at All Chicago. So those are instances where you'll want to use the HUD website and their resources that are available. If you have eSNAPS non-technical problems about the application itself, or if you're unsure about budget amounts or specifics to your application, those are things you can definitely contact All Chicago staff about, as well as any problems in Survey Gizmo or if you have questions about deadlines. All right, so we'll just get into the actual steps of the project application itself. There are 4 different steps. It'll look very similar to previous years. None of this looks any different. The first step is a project applicant profile, and then the next step is registering for that funding opportunity. Then you'll create your project applications in eSNAPS, and then finally you'll access the actual application itself through the submissions. So those go in order, in the order that you should complete them. All right, step 1 is completing the applicant profile, and there is, of course, a whole separate set of instructions just for completing the applicant profile, so you'll want to review that as well if you haven't already done so. This is a step you can already complete without having anything open in eSNAPS. It's important to note that the applicant profile should be completed and updated before starting the application process. So if you haven't already done this, I would recommend doing it as soon as possible. You can get this out of the way. So only after doing so will the project applicant be able to advance to the project application in eSNAP. So if you haven't done your applicant profile and there isn't one completed in there, you may have difficulty, so it's good to get that taken care of. To complete your applicant profile, it may be marked as complete, so you'll just have to put your applicant profile in edit mode in order to make any edits to it, so you can access that through the submission summary screen. Basically, all of your attachments should be attached and accurate and must be signed and dated between May 1st, 2016 and September 14th, 2016. So even if you had just attached them through the last competition at the end of last year, you will need to upload them again and attach them again to this year's competition. So this has to be done every year, regardless if it's the same document. So even if it's the same document, you should attach it again so that it has the date from this competition. Any incomplete or out-of-date documents can delay conditional awards, so HUD really stresses that you should do this and make sure that every attachment does have the correct dates and signatures on them and that they're completed thoroughly. Just a list of some of those attachments that will be included in your applicant profile. The first one is a HUD Form 2880. Just make sure the important thing to note on here is that it reflects your funding being requested for fiscal year 16. So if you're not sure about that, you should check the DIW, but that needs to reflect your funding that you're requesting for this competition. So again, even if you had updated it in the last competition, you need to update it with the new amount. Then you'll have a disclosure of lobbying activities form, which is pretty straightforward. The code of conduct form may not need to be completed. It's required for some projects, but if it's already on file with HUD, you don't need to complete it. There is a list that you can access through HUD that will indicate whether you have to complete it or not, and eSNAPs will tell you whether it's required as well. You'll also have a drug-free workplace certification that's required and nonprofit documentation that's required for anyone that selects that they are a nonprofit. And then finally, you'll have that survey on equal employment opportunity. So most of these are pretty straightforward, not a lot of information to fill out, but mostly signatures and dates. So that completes the first step of the applicant profile, and then you'll go to the second step of registering for the funding opportunity. So you'll navigate to the funding opportunity registrants workspace, and then you'll click on that little icon with a check mark next to Renewal Project Application Fiscal Year 2016. So you might have an additional list of opportunities listed there, so make sure you're finding the Renewal Project Application for Fiscal Year 2016. Once you've selected that, basically you will just get to a screen where it will ask you if you want to register for the funding opportunity. You'll wait for the screen to refresh, and that's it, and then you can navigate back. So that step is pretty straightforward. You're just clicking that yes, you want to confirm that you're registering. Once you finish with that step, you'll go to step 3 of creating your projects. So you actually have to create your projects in eSNAPs as well. So the first step is, again, doing that registering for the funding opportunity, and then you can finally add your projects. You won't be able to add your projects until you complete that step. So you'll click on the icon with the paper and the little plus sign to add your project. You should enter the project name exactly as it appears on the grant inventory worksheet and your HUD contracts. If you're not sure, definitely access that grant inventory worksheet on our website. It's posted now. And I should mention too that today is the last day to do any changes to the grant inventory worksheet. So if you do have something or have not checked that document yet, you should access our website after this webinar and just make sure it's all accurate and complete. So once you've entered your project name to create your project, you can import data from your previous applications that are being renewed. So that'll just input some basic information from previous applications. And then you'll have to click Save and Add Another for every project that you're doing. So if you have multiple projects that you're renewing, as many of you do, you'll have to do this step repeated for each project. So once you've completed your applicant profile, you've registered for the funding opportunity and created your projects, that's when you'll finally get to that submission screen where you can access the actual application itself. So you can utilize the filter or the sorting functions to find the correct submission, because you may have multiples, especially if you've been in here for a number of years renewing. And so you'll want to search for Renewal Project Application Fiscal Year 2016, and then click on that little file folder icon to the left to access that submission, and that will be one per project. All right, so I'm just going to check if there are any questions before I get into the details of the application itself. Doesn't look like there are right now. Okay, great. So you'll see the project application is divided into 8 parts. It was previously 9, so as I mentioned, that performance measures section has been removed this year. So you'll see these 8 sections, and we'll go through the details of each one of these now. The first section is Part SF424, and that's just a universal application for federal funding. So you'll want to indicate in 1A, you'll want to make sure that it's indicated as renewal. If it's not indicated as renewal, you'll want to go back and make sure that you've registered for the right funding opportunity, because that will give you a different application if you don't have renewal there. 5B is going to be the only editable field. So most of the information in this section is just going to pre-populate, like I said, from previous applications or from other information you've already entered. So you'll want to enter in 5B the correct expiring grant number, which is again located on that fiscal year 16 GIW. So you'll want to keep that GIW handy. You'll need to access it multiple times to make sure everything's correct. The next part is under 1D congressional districts. You'll have to actually enter in your start and end dates here. A project renewing in fiscal year 16 must have a start date in calendar year 2017 and an end date in calendar year 2018. Okay, so there should be no dates that don't start in 2017 and end in 2018. Then for 1E under compliance, question 19, you must select B, program is subject to EO 12372, but has not been selected by the state for review. So everyone will select B there for that question. Part 2 handles subrecipients. So this section is only completed if your agency receives funds and then re-grants funds to other agencies. So if you have subrecipients for this particular project that you're completing the application for, you'll need to complete some additional information about those subrecipients. So you should know if you have subrecipients. You've probably done this in the past, but if you're not sure, you can let us know. So project applicants that are not required to complete this screen if there are no subrecipients. The next part deals with recipient performance, and this is the same 4 questions as in previous years, so these should look familiar. The first is regarding APR submission, and we'll ask whether you successfully submitted the APR on time for the most recently expired grant term. So I know that there has been some eSNAPS issues in terms of APRs in the last year, and so I have submitted a question to HUD just to ensure everyone knows how to answer this question appropriately based on whether or not they've submitted their APR. As some of you might not have still submitted your APR for the most recently expired grant year if it's not available in eSNAPS. So we're pending a response from HUD on that, so if that's your question, just sit tight and I'll send out that information once I receive an answer. For now, just answer it accurately based on whether or not you've actually submitted that APR. Then you'll have a question about resolved HUD monitoring findings. So again, you'll just answer that accurately, as well as questions about quarterly drawdowns and expenditure of funds. So just answer those yes or no. If you do answer one of the other yes or no, you may get another box where you'll have to enter in a narrative for a little bit more explanation. Part 3B is project information. So again, this is similar to previous years. It's a program description. So you need to describe the project at full operational capacity, meaning when your project is full, what does it look like to HUD? Okay. So your narrative must describe all of the following items. And this is very important that you're thorough in your narrative and make sure that you address all of these items. So you should describe the need for your program. So where is the need in the community for this type of program? And then identify your target population. So who are you serving? What is your population? Are you serving youth, vets? Is it open to singles, families, etc.? And then you'll want to describe what the project plan itself is. So what is your project type? Is it permanent housing? How many beds do you have? How many units? And what the setup is. So is it project-based? Is it scattered site units? So provide enough information to get a picture of what it looks like. You'll also want to talk about your project outcomes and what your performance outcomes that you're expecting for the program to meet at the end of the grant year. You'll also talk about coordination with other providers, such as linkages or services that won't be provided directly through the grant, things like that. You'll want to describe how those will be provided to your participants. And then briefly, the reason why HUD dollars are needed and why this program needs to be funded by the CoC program. You can definitely reference other parts of the application, but you want to make sure that information does not conflict with other parts of the application. So make sure that your bed numbers are the same or your population served remains consistent throughout your application. So that's something we're going to be checking for pretty heavily when we do our review, and something that HUD has come back with and stopped, and put conditions on the award in the past, just to make sure that they're clear on what your program looks like, because they want to make sure everything in your application is matching up and makes sense together. So you can't describe, a certain number of beds here and then in the later sections have a different number of beds. So make sure everything is matching up and is accurate according to the full application. I'm just going to check for. So I got a question about whether this is accurate or similar to the evaluation tool narrative. So I think you're referring to the program models chart narrative. It's a little bit different. This one has a lot more information than that one has in it, but you can definitely take parts of that, such as being housing first and using CRIS to access referrals. So you can definitely talk about some of that information, but I think this has a lot more information than was looking for in that particular narrative. Good question. Okay, so part 3 continued. You will then have the same screen that you had last year regarding housing first, so this looks exactly the same. You'll first answer, does the project quickly move participants into permanent housing? And what they mean by that is basically that you are moving people into permanent housing quickly without additional barriers, such as a certain time in transitional housing or a certain time accessing services before they can access housing, things like that. So they're making sure that you're moving quickly into permanent housing. And then you'll have those same questions about whether you're ensuring that project participants are not screened out based on the following items. And so they want you, if you are housing first, to be able to check all of those instead of, obviously not none of the above, but to be able to check that you are not screening out for any income issues or substance abuse or criminal record, with exceptions for state-mandated restrictions, as well as history of domestic violence. Then for C, you'll also have to answer whether you ensure participants are not terminated from the program for all of those reasons listed there. So if you're able to check all of those boxes, D will actually pre-populate with yes or no based on your responses above. So it is important to note that if you were housing first in a previous application, you do need to continue to be housing first. So that's a requirement written in to the instructions and into the NOFA. So ensure that you are maintaining previous answers as well. So additional questions will start to appear regarding the project type. So based on whatever project type you are, this is sort of where the application might split off into different questions or have different questions appear. So I'll do my best to go through some of the main sections that you'll have, but this might vary going forward for the various program types. Most projects will have a question regarding, does the project request cost under the rental assistance budget line item? You'll only answer yes there if you have a rental assistance line item on the GIW, okay, if you have that budget category on the GIW. So again, you'll want to reference that grant inventory worksheet to make sure you're answering that accurately, because additional questions will appear in your budget section if you answer yes to that. Coordinated entry SSOs will have a bunch of further questions, so just answer all those questions accordingly if that is your project type. The next part is part 4, and housing and services. So this talks about your supportive services for participants. You'll basically have a list of supportive service options there, and you'll indicate who is providing that service, so whether it's the applicant or a partner or a subrecipient, and then you'll also indicate the frequency. So you'll want to put the highest frequency. If something occurs in multiple frequencies or can vary, you'll want to put the highest frequency. And same with the provider. If multiple providers are providing, there's a certain order that they would like you to put that in, which is in the instructions, but it starts with applicant, and then I believe subrecipient and partner, etc. So just make sure you're putting the highest frequency there that it's being provided in. You'll then have additional questions, as you saw below that section, which talk more about mainstream benefits and connecting to those. So these questions were also included in the application last year, so they should look familiar. It will talk about transportation assistance to clients to attend mainstream benefits appointments, employment training or jobs, whether or not you use a single application form for benefits, and these other questions related to the same topic. So the last one will be access to SSI and SSDI technical assistance provided by the applicant, so whether or not you provide that. And then if you answer yes to that, it will say, has the staff person providing that technical assistance completed SOAR training in the past 24 months. So some of these will appear based on previous answers. For 4B, you're getting into your housing type and location and also starting to populate your bed numbers. Your beds and units should reflect full capacity at a single point in time. So it's not asking for how many you serve over the course of your grant or anything like that. It's really asking for at full capacity at a single point in time. And this should not change from your previous grant agreements. So this should be consistent with what you've previously put in. It shouldn't change. And the summary fields there that you see in that screenshot are actually compiled from all the housing locations that you'll list below. So you go to that little icon, again with the paper and the plus sign, and you'll add a new housing type and location detail. So you'll basically indicate what that particular location is, whether it's one or multiple. You'll have to enter in all of them. And that'll ask whether it's dormitory style, SROs, etc. And it'll ask you what type and how many beds, and then it will populate the total based on what you provide. Certain project types will have a variety of different other questions to answer. So for TH, it will ask about youth dedicated beds. If you're a safe haven, it will ask about veterans, family, and youth, I believe, or veterans and family for sure. I haven't been able to look at it, so I don't know the exact ones, but it will vary based on your project type. And then for PSH only, you will be asked about chronically homeless dedicated beds and units as well. Again, this will look very similar to previous years. If you're a PSH program, you will have to indicate your beds that are dedicated currently for chronically homeless individuals and families. So that's not if they happen to serve chronically homeless, that's if in your grant agreement your beds are dedicated to serving those who are chronically homeless. Then you'll have to answer beds that are likely to be available upon turnover during that year, and how many of those beds will be prioritized upon turnover. And those questions are specific to non-dedicated beds. So if they're already dedicated, you won't be able to prioritize them. This is asking for non-dedicated beds that will be prioritized upon turnover. So the dedicated beds, again, are indicated in your grant agreement, but should also match what was reported in the housing inventory count. So you should be consistent with those numbers. And beds prioritized at turnover will then also be incorporated into your grant agreement. Once beds are dedicated or prioritized, the project must continue to dedicate those beds to chronically homeless. So if you had beds dedicated in previous years, they must remain dedicated in this application. So you cannot reduce those numbers. PSH projects are strongly encouraged to prioritize beds for chronically homeless upon turnover. This does have a significant impact on our CoC application score, and so based on everyone's answers in all these project applications, that will actually populate into our CoC application as the percentage that are dedicating beds upon turnover. And the threshold for points, according to HUD and the NOFA, is 85% of beds upon turnover. I can tell you we're not near that percentage at this point, and so you are strongly encouraged at this point to prioritize beds for chronically homeless upon turnover. I will note that at the CoC board meeting this coming Monday, there is a motion to consider mandating that PSH projects dedicate beds upon turnover or prioritize beds upon turnover to chronically homeless for all PSH projects. And so if that ends up going through, we will update you on whether or not you will need to change your numbers here. And that will come through through the feedback process. So for now, you are strongly encouraged to prioritize beds for chronically homeless upon turnover. So I know I'm going to have questions, so I'm going to check that real quick. Okay. I have a question about whether if you are in the middle of changing some of your grants or in the middle of making amendments, should you change that information here? So no. If those amendments have not already been signed and completed by HUD, this has to reflect what is currently in your grant agreement. So until something is finalized with HUD in a signed agreement, it should not be included. But you can always check with us on individual questions after the webinar as well in terms of that if you're not sure. And when in doubt, things should match the GIW. But if it happens to be a bed number issue, it should usually match your previous numbers until that changes through HUD as a final confirmation. Okay. The next part is participation and outreach information. And this, again, will reflect data at a point in time and not over the course of a year or the term of your grant. So think about your project at full capacity, the number of beds you have and how many people fill them and what their characteristics are. So we'll look at this in just a second, but it's not over the course of how many people you might serve in the term of the grant. So in this section, you'll remember it looks something like this. So those dark gray boxes are going to be non-applicable, and then you'll have light gray boxes that are auto-calculating based on your other responses. You can feel free to utilize HMIS art reports in order to get a picture of what your project looks like at a point in time, if it could vary. So feel free to use those reports, and you can always contact your ATA to get those reports and utilize the HMIS team for assistance if needed. So again, it's going to look very similar to this. This is a screenshot from last year, so it could look slightly different, but this is basically where you're going to input your household information. So some of these are going to be at the top mutually exclusive, so you can have households just in one of those types, and then you'll have a total number of households, and then you'll further break them down into those characteristics. And so in those households with at least one adult and one child, you'll break it down about who the adults are and who the children are. So it could look different, the categories that they have under characteristics, but then it will basically total those up and should all even out at the end. Again, this is based on your program at full capacity, so this should generally match your unit and or bed numbers that you've already provided. You'll then have the next screen, which also coincides with that first 5A screen. So this is 5B. And basically anyone that was represented on 5A should also be represented on 5B in at least one column. The first three columns are mutually exclusive, so those will ask about chronically homeless veterans, chronically homeless non-veterans, and non-chronically homeless. So they will basically, you'll have to fit everybody into one of those three categories. And then there's also an option for persons not represented by any of those. So either way, any household that was represented on 5A needs to be represented in one of these other ones. It will also then ask about various subpopulations, such as persons with HIV/AIDS, mentally ill, etc. And so those don't have to be mutually exclusive, as people can fit into more than one subpopulations in columns 4 through 9. So just keep in mind what should match up based on your total household numbers in these screens. I know it's a little confusing to look at, so I've just added this screenshot from the instructions. So the one family on 5A is a household with at least one adult and one child. So then it will be further broken down on that screen into one adult between the ages of 18 and 24 and two children. And then on screen 5B, that household with one adult and one child is actually indicated in multiple columns there. So there's one adult with chronically homeless veteran, one adult who's with chronic substance abuse, etc. Let me see if I have questions. At a point in time using the art report, is there a particular date should be used for the point in time? There is not. You'll just have to run that based on when your project was at full capacity. But HUD does not indicate a particular point in time. Okay. The next part of Part 5 is participation and outreach information. So for outreach for participants, you're basically entering the percentage of participants from each location or situation. So this is where it will ask you where your participants are coming from, whether it be the streets or emergency shelter or transitional housing, etc. It must total 100% in order to submit the application, because all of your participants should come from one of those categories, so it should equal 100%. The really important thing to note here is that applicants should ensure that all participants are coming from eligible locations for your particular project type. So certain project types should not have, for example, persons at imminent risk. PSH projects cannot take people who are at imminent risk of homelessness. So that's an example of when you need to ensure that all of your participants are coming from eligible locations for that particular project type. And 0% should be indicated for homeless persons as defined under other federal statutes. So that category has not been approved by HUD or the CoC, so you cannot have any percentage listed under as defined under other statutes. Finally, Part 6 is your budget information. So generally what to remember here is that everything should match your GIW. So select the costs in those checkboxes for which your funding is being requested, so which budget categories: leased units, leased structures, supportive services, operations, HMIS. So you'll only check the ones in which you have funding in the GIW in those categories. And then basically the rest of the budget section will show based on your selection here. So make sure that you're selecting the correct ones so that you get the appropriate pages to follow. Then under 6B, if you have leased unit budget details, or if you had selected that particular category, you'll be able to select Illinois, Chicago, Joliet, Naperville as the metropolitan FMR fair market rent area. So make sure you're selecting that one if you have this particular category, if it asks for your fair market rent area. And then for 6E through 6G, which is supportive services, operating, and the HMIS budget categories, the quantity and detail will be needed for each cost. So you'll further break down every line item for those particular categories. And it's really important to note that a lack of detail here may result in conditions on your award. So simply putting one FTE is not enough information and does not provide enough detail. So you'll need to provide not only the quantity but also the detail of each cost. All right, Part 6 is continued when you enter in your match under 6H. So the match information entered in the application should be based on the current commitments at the time of application. So as of right now, what are your current commitments that will cover the requested grant operating period for fiscal year 16? So these should not be based on projections. You will need to submit documentation once you execute your grant. These should be current commitments that you have for match. And it will be noted that leverage has actually been removed from the project application as well as the CoC application in fiscal year 16. Just a policy update in the CoC program. This was sent out via listservs previously, I think earlier this year. So program income can now be counted as match funds, and you should see HUD guidance for additional details on that if you were hoping to use that as match, just to get the specifics of how that can be counted. Once you complete all of those separate budget category screens, you'll have a summary budget. So all items will be pre-populated from those previous screens, and then you will enter your admin amount here. So you'll see all of them are grayed out, and the admin amount is the only one that you can enter in here. And again, the admin amount should match the GIW amount that you have for admin in fiscal year 16. So you are not able to change that at this time through the project application. And you're not able to change any other budget categories or line items in the actual application itself. Once you have completed all that, you'll get to the submission summary. and you'll want to make sure that all areas are complete, but do not hit that submit button yet. You'll have to submit to All Chicago first for a review, and then we'll let you know when you can submit in eSnaps. But you'll want to make sure you're going through and everything that says please complete has not been completed, so you have to go back to those sections and make sure that you've completed them. And then you'll also have notes at the bottom which will indicate what hasn't been completed or specifically questions that you need to address. So use that screen to help guide you if you are not sure what is incomplete in your application. So getting into your steps to submit to All Chicago. Again, you'll complete that applicant profile and your project applications in eSnaps, but you will not submit them just yet. You'll want to download the All Chicago Review Checklist, which will be available after today, and you can use that to review your applicant profile and your project applications to make sure they're complete. And then you'll submit that PDF of the applicant profile and the project applications to All Chicago staff through Survey Gizmo. So again, do not submit in eSnaps before we review the PDF copy and provide you with some feedback about your application. And just a reminder on that due date, the PDF copies will be due in Survey Gizmo by August 1st, no later than 5 p.m. Then All Chicago will give feedback to agencies for each project application by August 8th, and you'll be required to then make changes per the All Chicago feedback. And then finally, you'll submit an eSnaps and notify us that you've done so by August 12th, 2016. And that is by noon on that date. So noon on August 12th, 5 p.m. on August 1st. So in order to submit to All Chicago, you'll first download a PDF of your submission from the submission summary page. Basically by clicking that export to PDF button that's highlighted there. And then you can save it to your computer as well. We recommend you save a copy of what you're sending to us just so you have a record of it, and then you'll submit your PDF to us. And you'll access that submission page at that link there, which we will again send out all of this information via email so that you have it all in one place. And we will send that out later today so that you have it. Within that survey itself, you will have to complete your agency contact information, your agency name, and then upload PDF of your applicant profile. Most of them are set to a 2 megabyte file size limit at this point and should be only in PDF format. If you're having difficulty uploading, just let us know. And then you'll indicate the number of CoC funded projects that are applying for renewal. So basically it will provide you with additional upload options based on how many you select here. So if you have 10 projects, select 10. If you have 3, select 3, and you'll get that many screens to submit your project application. So it will all be through one submission in Survey Gizmo. So wait until you have all of them completed and then go in and submit all of them together. For each project application that you're submitting, you will list the project name and again list it as it is on the GIW. You'll also list the grant number as it is on the GIW, and then you'll simply have an option to upload the PDF. This year we're also requesting some additional information just to have on our records and in our files. So we'll ask you just for your local HUD representative name. If you're not sure who your local HUD representative is, you can simply put I don't know, and we'll just follow up with you later to get that sorted out. If you have executed your fiscal year grant agreement, you should upload that here as well. Some of you send it to us via email in a variety of formats, so it's just helpful for us to have it all in one place here for everyone, and so that we know which grants are executed as well. And then you'll also upload any grant amendments should you have any to your fiscal year 15 grant or anything that would help us understand what grant amendments are in place. So if you haven't done that, you'll simply just check we haven't updated or we haven't executed our grant agreement yet, and that's fine. If you have any questions throughout this entire process, it's best to use our CoC programs email, cocprograms@allchicago.org. You can certainly contact me directly or Dave or anyone else but it's easiest to go through that CoC programs email just so we can keep track of what questions are coming in consistently and be able to forward your question to the most appropriate person to answer it. So use that CoC programs email first whenever you have questions. Just to cover some of those resources again, you'll have the All Chicago website, which will update with all of those links and the access to the Survey Gizmo site as well. Then you can access HUD resources through that link there if that's easier for you as well. And then finally, that's the link to eSnaps to access eSnaps. So let's see if there's any questions. We will post the slides after this webinar. So don't worry about that. That will be posted to our website. I don't know when the application will be available in eSnaps. HUD has indicated to us that eSnaps will be available by this week. So they had said the week of the 18th. When I checked this morning, it was not yet available. You can certainly go in and check if it is available at this time or by the end of today. But it should be available shortly, as we're told. The GIW, if you need to locate it, is on the All Chicago website. We will also, when I send out that email later today, we'll include a link to that as well, if that would be easy. And I will expect the recording of this webinar to be available also later today, and we'll post that on our website in the same area. So let me see here. Might have some hands raised. Let me see. All right. Charlotte, do you have a question? Charlotte Moore, your hand is up. Do you have a question? You are unmuted. Nope. Okay. Okay. So let me just see if there are any other questions before we sign off. Got done on time. Let's see. Yes, we'll be posting this presentation. So again, part of the APR question, we just had a question about the APR. So yes, you'll have to answer whether or not your APR has been submitted to HUD for your most recently ended grant. So I know for some of you, you have not submitted it. So in that case, you would, as of right now, answer no, and you can provide an explanation, whether that's that it hasn't been available in eSnaps or for whatever other reason. I have submitted an Ask a Question to HUD regarding that question, just to make sure I am providing the right guidance to make sure that everyone's answering it accurately. But as of right now, I have not received a response to that yet. So just sit tight. But as of right now, if you are completing it, you will have to complete it based on your current status of your APR and whether it's been completed. I'm getting a question about whether there's a Part 7. There is a Part 7, but it's just attachments, so that will vary based on, for the most part, whether you have subrecipients. There might be additional attachments for nonprofit documentation and things like that. But if you don't have anything like that, you will not need to attach anything. So Part 7, I did go from 6 to 8, but Part 7 is just attachments. I don't know when I can expect to hear back from HUD about the APR question. I did submit it probably a week ago, so sometimes the HUD Ask a Question does not respond as quickly, but I will send out that once I get more information. All right, I think I've answered everything. Please submit any additional questions to our CoC programs email. If you have any additional questions, feel free. And we will send out more information as well as notifying everybody when we see that eSnaps is available, but feel free to keep checking in eSnaps. It should be made available hopefully today. So I'm really hoping, but we will continue sending anything out, and at this point you'll just have been trained and ready to go once it's posted. For right now, you can review the detailed instructions that are posted, as well as the eSnaps guide that is posted, so you can get an idea of what you'll have to do. And again, you can complete your applicant profile at this point, so if you haven't already done that, that's a good place to start until eSnaps opens, and you can get that out of the way. All right, so with that, I don't see any more questions coming in, so I'm just going to go ahead and end the webinar. Again, this will be recorded, and if you have any other questions, feel free to contact us at that CoC Programs email. This is just a final reminder of our timeline and what to expect, so keep these noted, and we'll be sure to post whether anything changes. All right, so everyone have a great weekend.